My name is Honea Sr. I was born and raised in Ruby. My mom and dad were Bill and Margaret Honea. My mother was from Cochrane, which is 30 miles above Ruby, which is no longer there now. And my dad was from Tennessee. And he came up here in the Army in 1919. He was in the old Single Corps, and years ago they had telephone lines all the way down the whole Yukon River. And that's what he did. He was a telegraph operator. When he first came up here, he was stationed at Old Loudon, which is right above Galena. Then they moved him up to Cochrane. They had an army camp there, and that's where he met my mom. It's on the north side of the river, where, there's only two white men towns along the Yukon. There is Rampart and Ruby, and they're on the south side. And so you don't get the sun and everything as well as you get on the north side. So Cochrane was really beautiful. My mom was born in Cochrane. Her mom and dad were both from Cochrane. In fact, they're still buried there. My dad had a big house in Ruby, and he worked all the time. He worked for the FCAA, and he had big gardens all the time. My mom too. She was very nice, very loving, very kind, and always there. When we were kids, we didn't know that we were poor because we didn't have bicycles or sleds or anything else. I grew up in a home that a native language wasn't spoken unless some native friends came to visit my mom, and then they'd speak native. But I grew up in a white society. It was Ruby was predominantly white and very prejudiced. We had a lot of native were looked down upon at that time. And we were all called half-breeds, and we just assumed that's what we were, half-breeds. And it put kind of a stigma on you when you grew up, It's pretty tough to grow up in a society that way. I never knew the difference between I was always a half-breed, that's all I was. We went down to Eklutna in 43 rather, and there was a woman down there named Flora Harper. She was the first native to graduate from the university. And she took me into her room one day and she asked me what I was. I said, I'm a half-breed. And she got really upset with me. She said, don't you call yourself that. That's the worst thing you can call yourself. I didn't know the difference. I just assumed I was a half-breed, and that's what I was. It's really hard because I couldn't even go into a restaurant and eat by myself until I was about 30 years old, because I was so, I felt so inferior to everybody else. It's really a hard feeling to describe. And in 1942, there was a lot of places up in Fairbanks here that had whites only on it, signed white only. We went to, let me see, the 6th grade in Ruby. It was a one-room schoolhouse. There was no running water. You had outside toilet, and it was pretty primitive according to today's standards. The kids have it a lot easier now because there's so many native people here, but in 1943, when we moved up here, there was hardly any native people here. I was the only native student in that class. Man, I didn't have good clothes like the other kids had good clothes and everything. Mine were always the old stuff and hand-me-downs and stuff. Man, I really felt bummed. And I compensated by fighting with it all the time. I wasn't going to be the best or anything. I was going to be the toughest anyway. I was pretty much a loner, except when one of them would come too close to me and start saying something bad, then I'd start fighting. Call me an Indian, and what are you doing here? And making fun of my clothes. Claire and I got married. I was 17. And she robbed the cradle. She was 9 months older than me. I was so poor that I didn't even have a quarter in my pocket. And I didn't have a house to move into. I moved in with her into her tent. And we lived with her folks for the first 2 years of our marriage. I was in Cochrane's. After we got married, when I was in Cochrane, they used to have potlatches there, and they spoke the native language. And here I am, the only one in the room that couldn't speak the language or understand what they were saying. It was pretty strange sitting down not understanding anything we were saying. And everybody in the village talked native, except when they were around me. I'm kind of envious of these people, and they tell me about when they were growing up, what their mom and dad taught them, the old native ways and stuff. And I'm kind of envious of them because I didn't have the opportunity to learn those things. They were learning the old superstitions and all that stuff that natives learn. And they just take it for granted, you know, because that's part of their life. Whereas what I learned about the native ways, I had to learn on my own. We ended up having 14 kids. 2 died when they were babies of diarrhea. And we lost one through the ice. He was going to Galena on a snow machine and went into an open hole and drowned. And he was 24. You raise them for that long, you know, and then lose them. It's really hard. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. You gotta live your life. So life just goes on. It's just not as, you know, you miss them for a long time. In fact, I still miss them. But that's something that you have to live with. I was listening to the radio in 1975 when Emmett Peters from Ruby won the dog race. And I said, hey, that's what I want to do. But I only had 2 dogs. And then eventually I got my own dogs. So I had dogs all the time. And I always had good dogs. So I put together a team. And then I got in the Iditarod. That was in 1976. It was all new to me. I never knew the country before, and I really enjoyed it. I worked my butt off, but I was really enjoying it all the time. I came in altogether, I came in 6th, 7th, 8th, and 12th. I did it 7 times, but I finished 4 times. Feels good. When you get in the Iditarod and you train those dogs, you know, you never know exactly what you got until you get into the race. And the first few days, you think, oh man, I'll never make it to Nome. You get so down, you know, and then you just plod along, and then pretty soon you say, oh heck, I'll just take it one checkpoint at a time, and eventually you get back into the race again. I think it was in 64, somewhere 63 or 64, I started the Ruby Native Council because I started it they elected me the first chief. And that's how the Native Council got started. Well, there was a lot of Native issues that that the city couldn't take care of. The city council couldn't take care of, so we had to take care of those Native issues. And then eventually, we started the corporation, and I was the one that was going to all the meetings and everything, and so I knew more than most of the guys down there knew about what was going on. So I became the first president of our corporation, and I was the corporation president for 20 years. We invested a lot of our into stocks and stuff. Eventually, Harold Esmalco was coming up to Fairbanks quite a few different times, and I said, "What are you doing going to Fairbanks so often for?" He said, "Oh, we're thinking about starting up a bank." And I told him, "Well, is there any stock left over? Stock, can we buy any stock into it?" So I talked to my corporation, and they said, "Yeah, if there's some stock, buy it." So we bought some stock in the bank. So we ended up with quite a bit of stock. So we get a pretty good dividend from it, and that's the Denali State Bank. I think it was probably in my 40s before I finally got to the place where I felt good about myself, and I could go into a restaurant and eat, and I didn't care what was happening. If anybody was looking at me or anything else, I didn't feel inferior anymore. And I think that's my biggest accomplishment in life, was to get over that feeling. It was hard. It was really hard, but I overcame it, and I'm proud of that fact. I feel good about myself. Perseverance. Whatever they decide in life, don't give up on it. You know, over the years that I felt that amongst my Native people, a lot of times that I knew that the Native people gave up too easy. They didn't persevere. You have to put up with a lot in order to accomplish what you want. Nothing is going to be given to you. You got to earn what you get, and you're going to have to work for it, and you're going to have to be. Sometimes it's going to be pretty hard, but you got to persevere. That's the only way you can get by.